What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, we're going to be talking about Amazing Spider-Man number 9 by Zeb Wells and Patrick Gleason, as well as Amazing Spider-Man by Zeb Wells and Nick Dragotta. And in this video, I'm going to be explaining what I believe is the reasoning behind Spider-Man being blacklisted by his closest friends and allies. I'm also going to be talking about how Mary Jane turned Spider-Man's most popular mantra into the ultimate insult, and we're also going to talk about the celestial judgment of Peter Parker, as well as why Gwen Stacy is back. Was she a clone? Was she a variant from another Earth? Or was she in fact the original recipe Gwen Stacy?
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so to talk about this, you gotta jump around a little bit. If you've not been keeping up with Amazing Spider-Man under Zeb Wells, a lot has been going on. If you want to go back to Zeb Wells' takeover of Amazing Spider-Man with Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 75, that's kind of where a lot of this starts, but at the same time, there's a little bit of a time jump between Amazing Spider-Man number 93 and the relaunch of Spider-Man Volume 6. Number 1, we saw at the end of issue number 93 of Amazing Spider-Man in Volume 5. In the epilogue, it jumped from being weeks after the end of the story to being months after the story, and when we pick up with Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 1, we get another time jump where it's 6 months later, or rather 6 months earlier than when the comic actually takes place. So it could very well be anywhere between several months to even almost an entire year between Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 93 and Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 1. So if I seem like I'm all over the place, I apologize. It's just kind of the nature of how this works. But whatever is going on, we learned at the very beginning of Zeb Wells' relaunch on Amazing Spider-Man that he had done something. Peter has done something that he can't walk back. He has upset pretty much everyone close to him in one way, shape, form, or fashion. We know that he is completely and totally on the outs with Mary Jane Watson. She has completely dumped him, moved on, gotten with another guy named Paul, who kind of seems to be aware, at least in some way or another, of the situation that's going on. He knows who Peter Parker is. Not necessarily that he's Spider-Man, but he knows that that's Mary Jane's ex, and that something happened that caused her to come rushing to his arms, and he seems to be aware of some other thing that would make him feel he has to protect Mary Jane from Peter Parker. Once again, none of this is ever actually said as to what any of it is. We just know that these things are going on. We also know that whatever it was that happened, Aunt May has no clue what it was. She has no idea about any of the Spider-Man stuff that's going on, as Spider-Man has gone through varying stages of Aunt May knowing his secret and not knowing his secret. Right now, as I am aware, she does not currently know his actual real secret identity. This is a status quo I feel has been in place ever since Spider-Man One More Day, and that came out back in 2007. Point of the matter is, Peter, whatever is going on, he's been keeping secrets and he's not telling Aunt May anything. All she knows is that Mary Jane is out of the picture when she was very clearly in the picture when we last saw them together in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 93, so clearly something has happened and he's keeping Aunt May in the dark. It's caused her to become estranged from him and treating him in a very cold fashion because she feels like she has been treated very coldly. And while that has been patched up, but that's just one among many other things that let us know not all is well in Spider-Man's neighborhood. Whatever Peter did, it seems to have a lot to do with his alliance with Norman Osborn, who is seemingly trying to reform, for real this time, thanks to the Sin Eater literally taking away the sins of Norman Osborn, but leaving him to feel remorse and grief over the things that he's done to Spider-Man over the decades, as well as Norman's own family over the years in the name of the Green Goblin. This all goes back to Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 50. If you weren't keeping up with that, that was during the Sin Rising story arc where the Sin Eater had returned and had pretty much tried to absorb all the world's sin. That said, Norman has also been helping Spider-Man with new tech and gear for his suit, helping him fund his crime-fighting efforts, and all the while the Goblin is lurking, waiting to come back, or so Norman seems to believe. But I think that's almost too obvious of a thing because, for one, it's taking place after those 6 months prior, and whatever it is seems to have nothing to do with Norman Osborn. Or if it does, I feel like maybe Norman helped him in some way with something, or maybe Spider-Man reached out to him in some way that might have led to this, but it also seems like when Norman and Peter are kind of first interacting with one another in Amazing Spider-Man number 7, it almost kind of seems as if they are talking to one another for the first time in quite a while, so maybe there's nothing there. But what I can say, since Amazing Spider-Man relaunched and it was teased that he had, quotey fingers, crossed the line somehow, we've seen various other characters hint at the thing that happened. We've seen Human Torch mention Peter stole something from the Fantastic Four, and whatever it was something that could possibly have harmed Peter Parker. As Torch mentions, Spider-Man was attempting to throw his life away, though this could also be meant that Peter was going to do something with whatever it was he stole that he'd never be able to walk away from, like killing somebody, or maybe even creating a clone of some sort. I say this because I feel as though those children that Mary Jane has just kind of came from out of nowhere. They look like her and maybe even could potentially look as if they are both children of Mary Jane and Peter somehow. These children are completely impossible to be the age that they are for the short amount of time that has taken place between Zeb Wells' Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 93, and his Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 1. These kids are like easily 5, maybe 6 years old, and it's only been at the very least several months, or at the most, maybe a year. I'm thinking whatever it is has to do with that, and I'll get back to that here in just a moment because I want to finish what I'm talking about right here, right now, with this whole what it was that he did. To dig a little bit further, we kind of have to go to Amazing Spider-Man number 9, which is where the Hellfire Gala tie-in takes place, and Wolverine and Spider-Man are teaming up to try and save Mary Jane Watson, who has been kidnapped by Mora, who is now working for Orchis in an effort to get revenge against Krakoa. And Logan, while they're teamed up, makes a remark about Spider-Man's hand being steady, seeming that maybe he was on some kind of sauce, maybe he was juicing on something at the time, because once again, going back to that Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 1, when it says 6 months earlier, we see Spider-Man sitting in the middle of a crater the size of a football stadium, surrounded by purple smoke and gasping for air and screaming, and I can only imagine what it was that this could have to do with. Whatever it was took place in Pennsylvania 6 months ago, and very likely had to do with something the Fantastic Four had. There is something that Reed had very likely created, and Spider-Man stole it and used it for his own ends. Was this something to get rid of his powers in some way, or was this something to take down a villain that he felt he couldn't take down by normal means? It's hard to say at this point. But whatever Peter did, it has created a mega rift between himself and Mary Jane, and she actually slaps him in the face, metaphorically speaking, in that same issue of Amazing Spider-Man number 9, hitting him with his own mantra about, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's where it kind of gets us back to those kids, because there's something that she brings up when Spider-Man suggests the idea of them going to have coffee or just trying to catch up, and Mary Jane just seems incredibly defeated and incredibly tired of Spider-Man trying to rekindle things, even if it is just on a friendship level, and Mary doesn't want to have anything to do with it. She yells at him that it's not about him and that it's about responsibility. I thought you'd understand that. Now, this isn't a direct response to Spider-Man bringing up the character Paul, who MJ is now in a relationship, but I don't think this actually has anything to do with Paul. I think this has a lot more to do with those children. Whatever it was Spider-Man did, I think it resulted in those children in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I don't know if I can even make that make sense. I honestly feel like we're not going to learn anything about this until maybe after Dark Web, or maybe during Dark Web, which is fast approaching, as I believe that will start in November of this year. Now, part of me wondered, why is Mary Jane acting like if she does something with Peter, even if it's just something as innocent as them going and having coffee and just catching up, why is she so worried that someone might see them together? She keeps acting almost as if she's under some kind of duress, which is funny considering she was literally just under duress in this issue having Moira's robotic hand around her throat while she was at the Hellfire Gala ready to kill her if she was ever somehow able to warn the mutants that something was up. But for right now, my best guess is those kids are clones, and they are very likely tied to whatever it was that Peter did somehow, some way. Now to get to the Judgment Day part of this whole video, which is technically it's kind of loosely tied into a little bit of Amazing Spider-Man number 9, but not really. It's really more of a tie with Amazing Spider-Man number 10, because in this issue, we see that Peter Parker is being judged, and he's being judged by a very familiar face to himself, his former and dead lover, Gwen Stacy. And this isn't a surprise really, because the progenitor does often take the guise of someone who you either love, and maybe even in some cases, someone you might not even like, and judge you based on all the things that you have done throughout your life to dictate whether or not you can justify your own existence. This has been a major part of the Judgment Day Marvel Comics crossover event, the whole Avengers versus X-Men versus Eternal crossover. And right now, Peter is being judged, and I'm not gonna stand on ceremony on this. I think it's pretty obvious. Spider-Man got a pass. Are you really surprised? I mean, the guy is literally responsibility incarnate, even if he sucks at it sometimes. The truth of the matter is, doing the right thing is Peter Parker's actual superpower that he didn't even need a radioactive spider bite to get. The guy literally puts everyone else before himself more often than not, whether it's trying to save the world a million times over, or just trying to be there for his loved ones like MJ and Aunt May, or just trying to do the right thing by the other people who are in his orbit, like J. Jonah Jameson, despite the fact that J. Jonah was a whole asshole to him for most of his career up until recently. So yeah, that's not really a surprise that he got a favorable judgment. I'm more concerned about how Norman Osborn's gonna be judged. Is his incident with the Sin Eater during Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5 number 50, was it enough to balance the scales? Was it enough to turn everything around in his favor now that he has actual remorse and sympathy? Who's to say? But the real question now is, we saw Gwen Stacy. Cool. Why is everybody freaking out about Gwen Stacy being back? Why are people yelling and shouting from the rooftops that Marvel has finally jumped the shark, as if they haven't jumped the shark a million times before, you know, this precise moment? They're like, oh, they finally did it. They're the one character who they just couldn't let stay dead. They finally brought her back. They finally brought back Gwen Stacy. And it's like, well, yeah, I know technically some people are probably thinking, well, what about Spider-Gwen? What about Ghost Spider, the Spider-Woman of that alternate reality? Well, that's kind of the thing. She's not the, Gwen Stacy proper who died. It wasn't like she died and came back. No, I'm talking about the legit original Gwen Stacy from the night Gwen Stacy died that took place during the Amazing Spider-Man number 121 and 122 in 1973. And I can actually confirm, while yes, this is just the progenitor looking like Gwen Stacy, we do actually see the real Gwen Stacy in this issue. During Spider-Man's Celestial Judgment, the progenitor allows Peter Parker an opportunity to have closure with Gwen Stacy. The progenitor's power seems almost nearly limitless, as it usually is suspected of most other Celestials, but the progenitor revives Gwen Stacy, brings her back from the moment just after she died, giving her an opportunity to tell Peter Parker how proud she is of him and that he's doing the right thing. Stay the course. Stop, waffling about everything. You're not a bad person. You're doing the best that you possibly can. Which is, I'm not gonna lie, it's like, oh man, dude, kind of got me a little bit right there. This is the progenitor actually bringing the legit, real, actual Gwen Stacy forward from beyond the grave, giving them that opportunity to say words that they've never gotten an opportunity to say, and really more Gwen than Peter Parker in this regard. But it opens up a very interesting question about Judgment Day that I don't think I've even really thought about when it comes to this crossover event, that if the characters of the Marvel Comics universe are seeing the progenitor in the guise of the people who they care about, or those whose words would have actual weight upon them, what about some of the other characters that we've seen the progenitor take the guise of? We see in the same issue that Aunt May sees Uncle Ben and seemingly gives her a favorable judgment, and I don't think that's really a surprise either. But did he actually do the same for Aunt May as what he did for Peter and Gwen? Did he give Aunt May and Uncle Ben that opportunity? And in various other instances where we've seen other characters that have, seen their loved ones that had passed, did he give them the same opportunities? Did he allow them a chance to say goodbye or to hear the thoughts and words of their loved ones? Like, it makes you wonder a lot of things. It makes me feel that the progenitor is not as much of a jackass as, he comes off as sometimes. And I'm not saying that the progenitor is, a villainous character. I don't think he is at all. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, he's making a lot of fair points about the human race and the people of Earth and the Marvel Comics universe, and a lot of his commentary on them can be applied to the real world today. But I do feel like he's a bit of a jackass sometimes because he allows certain other characters their dalliances and not others, and there doesn't seem to be any real actual consistency there. But I do feel like this was one of those moments that might just be the watershed moment for Peter Parker in Zeb Wells' run so far to maybe help galvanize him to whatever it is the next step is. That's everything I wanted to talk about with Amazing Spider-Man number 9 and 10. If you want to know more about what's been going on with the Judgment Day crossover event, check out this playlist right here. And in the meantime, let me know what you thought about Amazing Spider-Man number 9 and 10. Have you been keeping up with Judgment Day? And what do you think about it so far? Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.